All right. Can you guys hear me? Let me see if I can get the chat here. So can you hear me? Awesome. Sweet. All right, guys. Let's start this. We have, let's see how many people we have today so far. We have 8 people, but as usual, we're recording the whole thing, so it doesn't quite matter, but I like when you guys are live so you can actually have your questions answered on the spot, which is always preferable. And then let's just go back here, and I'm gonna start sharing my screen straight away so we don't waste any time. Okay, so let's see. Bring up my ZBrush. Can you guys see the ZBrush? Let's just, let me see, like, I'm still not very familiar with this interface. Speaker view, okay, gallery view, right? And where's the chat? Okay. Okay, looks great. Okay, cool. So you see the ZBrush, right? Awesome. So yesterday, after we finished our session, I kept working on it as I promised. Remember that I basically like erased that entire area, right? Like the cheeks and a little bit of over the muzzle here and a little bit over there. And I resculpted. So let's see how much I got of that done yesterday. So I'm just gonna, oh, one thing I can do here I didn't show yesterday. Remember I actually, when I imported my mesh, I created all the polygroups based on the UVs, right? But to make it even easier, because right now I have all of those here. So let's just go back to the lowest resolution. And what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna hide things, just the stuff I wanna keep. I wanna keep like that, right? I'm just gonna keep the stuff that I need for the sculpting, and everything else I don't need. For example, the inside of the mouth is just like eats up a lot of polygons for the HD session. So I'm just gonna keep them hidden. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna just like keep the stuff I actually need for my sculpture. So that's gonna be about, let's see, about that, I suppose. So that's like 9,000 polys here on my base mesh. So what I'm gonna do now, of course, like you can recreate your polygroups at any time, but based on UVs, same way I said yesterday, right? It was, let's see, polygroups. Using the auto groups with UV kind of breaks up everything into little islands, right? But since I'm going to be doing this a lot, going back and forth between HD and non-HD, it's better if you have just 2 groups, one group that you're going to be sculpting the most, which is the case for the head for me, and the other one. So in that case, since I have just this stuff visible right now, I'm just going to click group visible, and then I'm going to press Control-Shift, and then open a little window outside here, and it's going to reverse it, right? So now I can actually create another group for those guys. So now I only have like 2 groups. Easy to simply, let me change the color. Group visible, yeah, green is better. So now I can see clearly that I have just 2 groups. It looks like Shazam. I just fixed it for the movie. So now we're gonna be, it's gonna be much easier for us to just like hide things, right? So I'm just gonna click this guy here, Control-Shift and click anywhere. And now I have that. I'm gonna press P to turn off the perspective. And I'm gonna go up in resolution level as much as I can, which is, in this case here, is gonna be 625,000 polys, because I'm hiding part of it. And the total, I think, was like probably like 1.1 million. And now I can go to HD. So to go HD again, go to the side of the model. And then around here in this area, I'm gonna press A. So I'm gonna go over there. And you're gonna notice that I have that entire area now covered with the pores, but it looks very artificial still, because they are very even and there is no difference in depth or anything like that. Everything is completely even, right? And you're also gonna notice that the transition here is pretty bad, because like I said, like I'm trying to reuse them as much as possible from the previous model. But in this case here, I'm probably gonna erase all this stuff and I'm gonna redo everything. Although in this case here, he's gonna have a beard, so I might not spend too much time in this area actually. I think I'm gonna skip that. But in other areas that are gonna be more visible, let's say if the beard is covering all the way here on the sides, I can just keep this one alone. But I'm probably gonna redo this entire area here eventually, and the top here as well. But for today, we're gonna actually concentrate on the stuff we did together since yesterday, which is basically like the pores area, right? So let's start by modulating this whole thing. If I pull it, let's see if I get it here. Let's pull some references here. Let's get, where is it? Right. This is my Photoshop. Let's see, I think I have here. Let's double click it. So open image. So that's my own face here, which is pretty disgusting. I actually showed in the summit. I have all the pores in there, and you're gonna notice that the first thing, some of them are deeper than the other ones. You have a lot of bumps, and you have a lot of kind of like cross-hatching in between those pores as well. That's kind of like, we're gonna get a lot of stuff like that from the micro displacement, but I wanna put some of that in my regular displacement as well. And when you start talking about lines, right, like when you have wrinkles, you're gonna see what I mean when I said before the connect the dots kind of game, right? You're gonna have like those little pores connecting to each other, so like there's a wrinkle in between them, because what's happening is that there's a compression happening, right? And then it's gonna be like the path of least resistance, I guess, you know. And then so those pores, those little holes, they're gonna be bending first, and then they're gonna look like they're connecting with each other. So when you sculpt the wrinkles, in lots of parts, when you have like deep pores like that, you can actually basically connect the dots instead of like creating a line that's just a random straight line that goes over them. You try to follow the path of the pores and connect them somehow, you know. So we're going to be exercising that, and also exercising the depth of those things and try to add some variation here. And my plan for today is to actually be able to not get this stuff probably done, because we're going to be trying different techniques to break the surface up, but is to actually create something that looks okay-ish, so I can keep working on it later, but enough for us to export some displacement maps, you know, and then bring those displacement maps back to Maya and do like some render, you know, because at this point here, I have like a base skin shader, a base skin color that I can use. We are not going to go through the paint just today, but we're going to start testing the renders, because once we have this scene set up in Maya, then from that point on is a matter of like just updating things, and then every time we have a new version, we just like send back to Maya, replace the mesh, and go from there with the new maps. So let's start modulating this thing. So yesterday I mentioned that I have those brushes. They're kind of like random, right? So I use the spray. I show you all the settings. So if you don't remember, like, you can go back in the video. But I have all the settings in there that I mentioned when I was working with them. But the thing is, like any brush other than the elastic brush, they tend to actually damage the form a little bit. So if I try to, for example, like to sculpt right here, you see like it obliterates the form. If I go to the wrinkles, to the pores in here, you're gonna see like you kind of like destroy them just by doing that. So when you use stuff like that, it's hard to modulate the surface, because it's gonna end up like destroying part of the surface, right? So the elastic brush is really good for this kind of stuff. So I'm gonna switch to elastic brush. So if I press E here, so elastic is the only brush with E, it starts with E. And then by default, it uses 87 for the intensity, if I'm not mistaken. So it's pretty hardcore. And by default, it uses RGB as well. So if I try to do that, it's gonna make this. So first thing you're gonna do, we're gonna actually turn off RGB, of course, and the intensity, we're gonna bring it down to around like 30. And then at this point here, you see it's deforming, just like where I pass with it, it kind of deforms the skin, but the detail is all there. The detail is gonna be riding on top of that brush, right? So following that logic of using the spray brush, we can try a combination of both. We can use this elastic brush and use a color spray or a spray, it doesn't matter. And then we can experiment with it. So by default, if I do it, you're gonna see there's some variation being introduced, but still not very well controlled. So we can actually do a little bit with some alphas. So we can just, my favorite normally, like I use alpha 39 or 35. So let's do 39, is a little bit more point here. So you see I have lots of bumps in there going on now. Just dismiss this. But then if I reverse it, those bumps are gonna go down, right? So I'm gonna add gonna go to Z sub instead. And now I start getting some more interesting stuff. I can get some more variation in there, right? So at this point, I'm still sculpting everything symmetrically because I want to save some time. So I'm going to do this. I can use a little bit of this brush to add some variation. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to just increase the intensity a little bit. And I'm going to go to alpha. And I'm going to make it a little sharper. So the points are actually smaller. It's not like so broad. So now I have like this very, very deep pores like that, right? So let's do, let's reduce the intensity here back to, let's see, 25. Let's see what it does. That's kind of nice. So it adds me a little bit of variation in there. So I can play with this a little bit and go and do something a little bit more custom. I can pick some of those pores and actually sculpt them a little bit more customized. One thing I have here today is the best tool you can have, which is a mirror, right? So I'm gonna put the mirror right here. And I was looking at my face today because unlike the other characters I was sculpting before, this one has a facial expression baked in it. So it's always tricky to imagine what's going on. You know, it's like if I'm smiling here, I'm looking at my face and I see exactly how those wrinkles are actually being created and how the pores are deforming. So in this area here, all those pores in the cheeks in here, they're gonna start getting a little bit more stretchy. So I'm gonna try to customize a little bit and add some of this stretch all by hand because that's basically what I'm doing this whole class, everything by hand. And then we're gonna start adding some wrinkles as well. We're gonna dig a little deeper in here to create like the nasolabial. And I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna carve those wrinkles instead of something that's completely like linear. You're gonna try to add more interest to it by breaking the lines up. So let's start here on the cheeks. And we're gonna make sure that's symmetrical so I don't waste time. Everything in the middle we are gonna be do asymmetrically, but on the sides, unless it's something very custom, for example, like some pimple or scars or things like that, that are gonna add more character to the sculpture, then I'm gonna be doing it asymmetrically. But to save time, if it's just pores like that, I can do everything very symmetrically at this point because that's just the basic pass we are working on. So I'm gonna do this. Let's see. Let's start with just like that. Just gonna add some randomness very slowly. This is gonna be like the first pass in here. There's I don't remember his name. There's an artist. He posted a tutorial about how he approaches skin, and it's the cool thing about his tutorial is that he's not using HD geometry. So he's probably like cranking that model super high res in non-HD. So that way he can actually use the layers. And then he's showing what's he's baking in each layer and everything. He doesn't show how much time it takes to export all those maps though. And I would guess that's taking a good chunk of time to just export those maps. Like, I don't know, like over an hour for sure. And in our case here, we're gonna export everything in about a couple of minutes, like probably 6 to 8 minutes, right? So that's the advantage of the HD geometry, one of them. But yeah, you don't have access to the layers, that's for sure. So now I have a little bit more of those, you know, just a little slightly less regular, right? So there's a little bit more of interest in there. The second thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go to my other brush that I showed yesterday. That was the skin random. That's the one with the little alpha that comes with ZBrush, the alpha 58. I also show you guys the settings for it. So what I'm doing with here a little bit different is just like cranking the contrast. Contrast by default here is 1. So I'm cranking it to about 2 and something, and then making it a little sharper in here. And then those lines are gonna start disappearing, but it gets sharper. So like those lines get a little bit thinner. And then the spray, I show you the settings as well. It's like nothing too fancy, like placement, scale, color, and you know, color doesn't matter because we're not doing color yet. So remember yesterday I mentioned that for this one here, if you do like circular motion with it, you can get some interesting detail. And so just to demonstrate with the big intensity here first, so you can see what's going on. That's the kind of detail that I'm getting if I get like a very, very high intensity, right? But that's not what we want. We want something that's a little bit more subtle, because like I said, we don't want to break up the surface too much to the point that everything, when you render, it loses the quality of the speck, right? Like you're gonna basically like break up to the point that it's gonna be a very rough surface, and then the specular is not gonna capture certain parts that they're supposed to be a little bit more smooth. So we're gonna try to use like a very low intensity, probably like 6 or 7. Let's test it. And that should be kind of enough to get some detail in there and interest without breaking up too far. So let's see even 6. So I'm gonna do that. Not too big, my brush is gonna remain a little bit smaller. And I'm gonna start doing that process of like circular motions without going over the same spot again. And I'm gonna just be doing this all over the place. Going up there. And slowly you're gonna start seeing a little bit more complexity added to the skin, instead of like simply those little dots everywhere. And then of course there are pimples and scars and all kinds of interesting stuff we can add to it. There is the directionality that we're gonna be working on because this guy here, in this case, I'm actually, oh, sorry, let's go back here a little bit, because I wanna make sure I'm working the same scale. So if I go, you know, make too big or too small here using the same size for brush, then it's gonna be different. So let me make sure that I'm working with the similar size at all times. So I'm gonna keep working on here, just to break up the surface a little bit. And then we're gonna customize some of those. We're gonna go with the elastic brush again, and we're gonna start like adding more volume around those pores, just to pump up a little bit some areas, like very custom stuff, almost like starting to add some bumps around the skin. And we're gonna pick a couple of those pores as well. We're gonna make them a little deeper and maybe a little bigger, just to really add more interest to the skin, right? If you look at the scans of the skin, if you get the super high resolution one, or if you go to the texturing XYZ one, right? You're gonna see there are a bunch of different, almost like layers of things happening, right? Like there's this micro displacement happening kind of like in between everything. And then there's the main pores, there's the wrinkles in there, there's the bumps and scars and all kinds of stuff. So so at this point, I just covered this entire area here with this little bit of, randomness to it, right? So it looks a little bit better than it was before. Now, what we can do, we can modify that elastic brush. So I have it with the spray set up here, but instead of like deleting it, we can just copy it, right? So let's go to brush, and then you can just say clone. And when you clone it, now I have elastic and elastic one. So the elastic one is gonna be the one I'm gonna be modifying right now. I'm gonna go back to dots instead of spray, right? And I add more intensity so we can see what we are doing. So you see like it travels in there, right? You can see there's a little dot that travels around it. It kind of like, almost like a snail, right? Like leaving the little track in there. So with that guy, what we're gonna do, we can actually start customizing some pores here. So we're gonna pick a couple of them. Let's make very strong first so you can see what I'm doing. So if I pick this pore here, see what I did there? It's just like get like very dig into it. So yeah, go to another one, for example, gonna be like that, right? But we are not gonna use that much strength, of course. You're gonna go to something around again, maybe like 30 or something like that. And I'm gonna start customizing some of those. So I'm gonna just go there, pick a few of them, and then just add, basically like what I'm doing is just like adding a little, getting to the middle of it and just doing a fast circular motion just to expand a little bit that the size of that pore, right? So that's what I'm doing there. So like getting one by one, not one by one, I mean like a few, right? Like just picking some key ones, because yeah, the pores, I mean, like it's not like a synthetic material, right? Like you're gonna get like all kinds of different things happening underneath the skin. You have like you have the fat tissue going on in there that's gonna affect your subsurface scattering as well. It's going to affect the surface. You're going to get some more bumps, right? Like if you look at someone who has a lot of fat in their bellies, for example, you're going to look like there's a little bit lumpy, right? Like you're going to see those little lumps in there. So under the skin is the same deal. It's like you have a lot of stuff going on. We have like ingrowth hair, and yeah, there's all kinds of different stuff. So see, just by adding that, like randomly, just picking a few of them, we start adding a little bit more interest, right? So we start to look a little bit less synthetic, but then still we need all those little passes. We need like to do passes for the micro wrinkles, connecting things there. Yeah, I'm gonna keep just like picking very randomly. I'm kind of like trying to spread them out kind of equally, right? Just so we get a little bit more of a natural pattern, I suppose. And let's go there. The same way I'm using this brush here with elastic, which is the non-destructive brush that I told you guys, right? So if you have something already sculpted, we can keep sculpting even though the form is already there. That's the thing some people don't get when they move from traditional art to digital art, for example, with ZBrush, is that you're not a slave of you don't have to follow necessarily a hierarchy how you build things, because at any time you can still tweak things. You can have, at this point here, if I have all this detail, I can go my lowest resolution and still tweak my primary forms, and I can keep working. For example, if I have my primary forms not completely in place, I can always go back here and still work on the highest resolution and not lose anything I already put in there. So if you work smart with ZBrush, you can get a lot of stuff done non-destructively. So you can keep working on it, and unless you do something terrible, you're not going to be losing your work, right? But this comes with time. I mean, like once you learn a couple of things with ZBrush, like some gotchas that ZBrush has, it kind of like becomes less likely that you're going to be messing up. So now I'm going to reverse this, and I'm going to start adding some bumps. But first I'm going to start with some big ones. I'm going to turn off the alpha. So I'm going to keep like without any alpha. And just, again, like a high intensity, just so you see what I'm doing here. This is the kind of effect that I'm looking for. But in between those pores. So I'm going to go back to around, like, I don't know, 30 or 29, something like that. I'm going to pick some areas here. And it's going to be hard for you guys to see what I'm doing. But if I go very close, you might. So right here, you see like what I'm doing there? It's like in between, you can just get some of those areas. And you don't need to go in every single one of them. You just like get, and remember, like this is our little couch that I was mentioning, right? Like you have the little in between, like the little buttons in the tufted couch right there. So I'm gonna be going in between, just like exaggerating some of them and adding form, because everything here, it's a miniature of a sculpture, right? Like if you're sculpting something really big and you're gonna have like all this structure in there, or you're sculpting a dragon or a creature, and you have to imagine that all those things, if this was like a huge model, they have to have a form and a hierarchy the same way you do with the primary forms of your sculpture itself, right? Like everything is kind of like a fractal kind of thing. It breaks down, and then, but everything has a top, like a hierarchy, and then it goes all the way to the lowest, right? So I just added a little bit of that, and then the skin started to look a little bit more interesting. So I have some bumps in there. Let's get some more in here. And then, like I said, we're gonna do some wrinkling, things like that today, but we are not gonna finish this part, but I'm gonna show you the techniques, all of them, and I'm gonna keep working on it later. Probably not too far down, because otherwise I cannot wake up in the morning. It's being a little brutal. So let's see, let's just fill up with the random again here, just because I didn't have it. Get more of that. I'm gonna switch to my elastic. Where is it? Elastic 1. And then I'm gonna keep building up some more stuff. This build up here is really good, this elastic, for the wrinkles around the eyes, for example. So if you have stuff in there, you can just carve the wrinkles with your, either like the DM standard or or the modified standard that like I'm using here, and then just like dig them. So I'm gonna keep doing this. And now we can start adding some more directionality in this, right? So like I said before, I can, if I'm not making like a pose like that, I'm probably gonna make things very similar to what I'm doing right now. But then since it's a pose, we're gonna start to actually carve some things here by hand. So I'm gonna add some direction to it. So I'm gonna go to my standard, and that's the one I normally use. Try to imagine this is my damn standard, because that's the modified one I'm doing since the first lesson, which is basically alpha 39, right? With that little modification, the alpha right there, make point here. And my stroke is actually at 0.02 lazy step. So again, let's crank the intensity so you can see how it looks like. And then it looks just like that, right? It's a sharp kind of brush. So I'm gonna bring down the intensity again. Let's see if 15 is too much. Yeah, 15 is still too much. So let's do this. Another thing you can do if you want something that's more random, for example, you see it's a little bit slow right now because I'm sculpting in this 35 million polygons, right? It's nice because you have control because it's the lazy mouse, but if you want to do something that's a little bit more random, sometimes I turn off the lazy mouse, and now it becomes a little bit more, you know, brute force. In this case here, when I turn off the lazy mouse, because you don't have all those lazy steps in between, sometimes I have to crank the intensity a little bit higher just to make sure that I get a similar result. And I'm gonna also make my alpha a little bit point here for the same reason. So now I get a little bit a closer result without using the lazy mouse. Now let's go back to the intensity again. And I'm gonna put down, let's see, 11, if I can do something like that. Yeah, so I'm gonna try to actually add some direction starting with this corner here. So if I look at my face here in the mirror, so I can see that those guys are gonna start shooting up, and then that's kind of like what I had a little bit before. So if I go right here really close, turn around. So I'm gonna try to add some direction by cutting those guys here. And you're gonna see that I'm gonna start like looking for the next pore next to it, right? So I'm gonna be trying to chase them and add those wrinkles in a way that it looks organic, you know. So I'm gonna bring them here. It's so subtle. I mean, like it's once you finish with it, you can see the difference and everything. But when you're sculpting, sometimes you kind of don't notice it. Same thing here. If I'm going to start adding that wrinkle for the nasolabial, the first thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to try to reinforce the nasolabial by going back in resolution all the way down. So here I'm at 556,000 polys now, right? And then I can actually reduce my intensity a little bit. And I have a brush that's the pointy one, right? I can actually do something like that, and it actually is gonna show. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna start with the line, and then I'm gonna break it. Instead of like going continuous line like that, that looks pretty fake, I'm gonna break it. So I'm gonna make a little bit of it, break it, and always like, let's make very strong so you can see again. So I'm gonna do this kind of move motion, you know, not quite like that, but I mean more like that, and then break and bring it up, and then more straight, and then another one, and then breaks down. So stuff like that, you know, it's like you can see on the side right there. So, but kind of like in a very subtle way, right? So I'm gonna go to 14 intensity. Let's see, yeah, so something like that. And because we are working in a resolution that's a little bit lower now, all this stuff is going to obviously be propagated to the highest levels, right? So when I get to this area here, we just like start breaking up, and then try to, you know, connect some of those dots in there. And I go back a little bit stronger now, and then sometimes it kind of goes over like that, right? So let me try to find a few here and connect. And then go back. So now I have a little bit more of a definition in my nasolabial, but I can still do go a little bit deeper. So the way I'm gonna approach now, I'm gonna reduce the intensity even further. From 14, I'm gonna go down to like 6. And I'm gonna grow my brush pretty much a lot like that. And now you can actually dig and get a little bit more of like a broad kind of modification right there. And because I'm working in a lower resolution, of course, I'm not concerned that the form is gonna be obliterated, like I said. That's why I'm not using the elastic brush in here. Because all the pores should be fine, intact at the top level. I'm just like sculpting a little bit of the secondary forms here. So the tertiary should be preserved. So we got that. And then let's go back to the resolution again, like to the highest. High resolution, you press D, that's the shortcut, right? D to go up, and then Shift D to go down. So I'm at 8 million polygons and then 35 now. So now I have a little bit more of a depth in there, right? So let's refine that line. Same deal. Let's go to, let's see, 11, something like that. And I'm gonna go and gonna dig those guys. And now I can see the pores, so I can actually start connecting them a little bit better. Let's make even point here than that. Let's do that. And then, of course, I can break up towards this side here as well. So not only going that way, but also, let's see for the, maybe like the stroke, I'm gonna need the lazy mouse for this step. Otherwise, I'm not gonna be seeing a lot here. Let's see if the lazy step helps me to see. Okay, I think it's gonna be better in this case here. So let's crank a little bit more, 10. And then I'm gonna start digging some of this stuff. So it's slowly breaking up the form right there. It's almost like at macro level, right? But not quite. I mean, I'm not like into the pore, right? It's just enough to get the impression that things are getting more complex. And then again, looking always like for those little pores to connect to. So you're gonna see, I'm gonna start breaking them up, but they're actually starting to connect to each other right here. Kind of like looking for a path, right? Like between those guys. And not always going the same direction. Sometimes you go slightly in a diagonal in relation to it. It's just, I don't have my, okay, let me keep my phone here so I can actually track time as well. So it's 10, okay, cool, we have plenty of time. So let's go, I'm gonna start, cutting a little bit further. Let's make it even stronger and try to get some lines very well defined here. So from here, I'm gonna start cutting towards the nose. You start seeing some of this stuff up here, right there. There's a little bit of cross-hatching that happens as well. Sometimes you can go from one pore to the other one in one direction and then come in and cut it, almost like a, like a little cross-hashed kind of pattern. So all this form here, because of this smile, is going to be propagating. So I'm going to be bringing a little bit further down the road here. And as you can see, I'm just adding the negative right now. I'm just marking those with little lines, but there's no volume being produced when I do this. I'm just like creating these cuts, right? So to add a little bit more natural feel to it, the same way we did before, we're going to get our elastic, right? And we're just going to fill up. So in between those wrinkles I just created, I can just build up. Oh, this is a spray, sorry. I'm going to get the one that's the plain one. Where is it? The elastic one, right? So in between them, I'm going to build them up like that. You're probably seeing very little in there, but I hope you are able to see. So just like building up. And it's just like trying to observe what's going on like in the mirror and try to reproduce basically, right? But a lot of stuff you have freedom, of course. And a lot of stuff here, once you have the subsurface scattering applied to the model, this stuff is going to blend completely. And in combination with the micro displacement we're going to be using to break things up, all this stuff is just going to blend. And the way that Arnold actually scatters things, especially with the random walk, that's the new algorithm that they're using for the new Arnold, he actually creates this very interesting effect in a very small detail. So for example, if you have a pimple, you're gonna see that pimple is super translucent. So I believe like this entire area we are detailing right now, you're gonna be able to see a lot of that detail in there. So I'm gonna keep working with this type of lines, you know, it's like creating those wrinkles and forcing them, and also gonna create some direction for the pores themselves. So I'm gonna do, let's go back to my regular standard brush, and I'm gonna try to make them a little bit more stretchy. Another way to do this, yesterday when I show you guys, when I capture the little plane I had with my pore that I sculpted, let's say if you stretch that plane, you can capture it again and create like a stretched pore basically. Or in Photoshop, you can just get that same alpha and just stretch it. And then if you have one, for example, like a 25% stretch, another one 50% stretch, things like that, you can actually speed up the process. Or you can sculpt stuff by hand. So in this case here, I'm going to sculpt some stuff by hand. So I'm going to add some direction to all those little pores. I'm going to start by digging them like that. And again, I'm going to look at my face, just double check. And basically, like, I'm seeing this propagation of the form going this way. And if I show you like very roughly here, it's going to happen like that. So this is going to be the direction, and like that. Like, it's going to keep propagating that way, right? There is a compression happening here. This entire area is going to be pulled out like that. So let's undo it. And very carefully, I'm going to do a similar thing with the direction of the pores. So let's go back right here, zoom in, and I'm going to start adding some direction to those guys. Like really expanding them. So basically, like I pulled the bottom of it and then the top of it. And it's almost like I'm reinforcing those little lines in between them, right? It's kind of like something that I had to do for a model, for example, like for Kong, when he sculpted for Skull Island. We had like parts of his face that I had to do some custom stuff like that for expressions. And I did some stuff like that, you know, it's like just I created this fake kind of stretching just by sculpting stuff by hand. But then of course, like there are techniques you can use to do this manually, right? And another thing is that if you're working with a model that's sculpting in neutral position, you get a lot of stuff for free when you get the deformation happening with the blend shapes, right? But then sometimes some stuff is not quite there. So you're gonna use like an additional displacement map. You can actually blend within the animation and combine with the rig, you can get the impression that things are stretching. But in this case here, I mean, like I'm sculpting already a model that's not gonna be moving. So I wanna make sure that I'm doing like a good job with the sculpture itself. I'm treating this as like I said before, it's kind of like a traditional sculpture, right? The detail I'm sculpting, if it doesn't work, I erase and I redo it, and everything is baked in there. So, you know, it's a good exercise for sculpting. Let's do that. Let's keep going here, and then you're gonna see like starting to add some direction. On top of that, we can add some micro direction using the same brush we are using for the randomness, just using it more directional. So when I get to this part here around the nose, I'm gonna do the same thing, but the stretch is gonna start happening that basically like this direction here, right? That this arch. So I'm gonna go like here, and I'm gonna try to follow that arch. So each one of those pores, I'm just pulling and doing like one stroke to the left and one stroke to the side, to the right, just to create these little lines, basically like forcing the pore to stretch, like side to side in this case. Right there. And then again, I can start like connecting things. Eventually they're gonna connect, right? Remember when I was sculpting yesterday, I was creating those triangles in between them. And then you can see that there's a little bit of almost like a synapses, I think that's what you call, right? You know, when you have the brain cells actually, you know, talking to each other like with electricity. So basically, like that's what it is. They're kind of like, you know, standing a little hand towards the next one, and you know, creating this little network, right? So that's how I'm kind of seeing this as well. So I'm kind of like, if I have a stretch, so I tend to believe that, you know, it's almost like if this is a very elastic structure, which is, then basically like it's going to be connecting to the next dot in the network. So I'm just going to be stretching it like that. And then in between as well, I can create a little bit more of interest right there. So yeah, this is the kind of stuff, I mean, like it might seem tedious at the beginning, but it all depends, of course, like how you like doing stuff. But when I put my headphones on and I have music, I don't quite feel what I'm doing. And then it's been like, let's say like 2 hours later, I see there's a huge chunk already done, you know, and I just put in render, start testing things. And then, you know, in a few days, probably like altogether, let's say like 6 to 7 hours or something of sculpting, then I'm gonna have something that looks pretty complex, you know. But everything takes time, and you guys gonna need to put time to get some results. So let me just get that. I can actually start introducing some pores in between here if I don't have any, maybe like some kind of pseudo, you know, just get a little bit more interest right there if they are too spread out. But you know what I mean? Like from that original one that looked, this area looked pretty much like it wasn't quite working, starts to look a little bit more interesting. And then we can go, of course, like and add like really custom stuff. So if I have like let's duplicate the elastic again. So duplicate, brush, clone, and now I'm gonna have an elastic too. I'm gonna use the drag rectangle instead. So make it very strong and see what we have so far with this little one right there. Okay, so it's pretty, let's use the add. That's very pointy. That's kind of interesting. Look at that. It's especially pointy. It's very cool. Should save that one for horns. But if I go to the alpha, I can tweak that, right? I have that point in there. It's interesting how the elastic really obeys that, because some other brushes, they do not obey like that. So I can make it a little bit rounder. Let's see something like that. Let's see what it does. Yeah, that's kind of better, right? So it's a nice little pimple kind of thing. So let's turn off the symmetry now. Let's add some asymmetry here, just to add some randomness to the face. So let's get the intensity a little bit lower. Let's see if it's too low. It's a little bit too low. Let's get a little bit more. Yeah, something like that. So now, just like randomly, gonna add some interest by creating some pimples. Same to the other side. Let's go here. Not all the same size. We can create some like a little smaller, right? Around here, right there. You can get a big one. Look at that. Woo! It forms the whole thing. So like that. Maybe like the nose right here. I can add some more, like maybe the top. Right there. And like I said, like sometimes it looks pretty strong here, but then once you have it with subsurface in the specular map, like a decent specular map, you should be able to start seeing the lighting traveling over the surface very nicely. So, you know, it's a matter of like really thinking about, you know, it's like, oh, okay, so there is some mosquito bite or there is a scar or something like that, and adding these things just to break up this pattern, because we start with a very even pattern. And it's just a matter of like how far you want to take in terms of breaking up that pattern. So I'm going to go back to my skin random right here. That's the one we had before that I was doing the circular motion to create the in-between detail, kind of like micro. And instead of going in circular motion now, we're going to go more of like a linear motion. So I'm going to do this very strongly again so you guys can see what's happening. It's very strong, right? So I'm going to reduce it all together. Actually, I don't know if you can see it. Let's do it again. More like that, right? So with that, I can actually fake a little bit of a stretch as well. So I'm going to just reduce the intensity. Let's see if 9 works for me. And I'm going to make a little bit bigger the brush here. And I'm going to go just in one direction. Let's see, probably around this area here, around the nose. That's where the wrinkles are actually happening. Let's turn off on my symmetry again so I don't waste too much. And then I'm going to start going from here, connecting towards the top like that. So really bringing some directionality. And same is going to happen around the eye bags here when I start finally sculpting it, because it looks very flat and weird and got all mushed out. But once I get in there and clean up, that's probably what I'm going to do. I'm going to add some direction, going that direction, right? Like around here. And then basically like doing this kind of like a arch right there, right? But at this point here, I'm going to just keep adding some more directionality, probably like around here, down close to the mouth. Right there. And then maybe some echo of that down here just to help, but I'm going to reduce intensity and make the brush a little bigger. Something like that. Yeah, it's a little bit more direction. It's very subtle, but it really works when you render those things. You know, it's like anything you can do to actually break up the evenness, it's all valid. I'm going to go back to my standard. I'm going to do some more manual sculpting here. So I still don't quite like this line in there. So I'm going to break it up even further. And you start adding some more interest here. And you see, like at the end, when you start connecting those things, you start feeling the form, you know. Things start making sense. For example, like first I did that pass to just like stretch those pores by hand, right? And now I'm going again and trying to connect some of them and pull this structure here towards the nasolabial fold. And then things start looking a little bit more organic in this area. The cheeks is still pretty plain, but this area here starts looking a little bit more interesting. Much lower than this, probably you're not going to see because we have the mustache, right? Let's just turn it on just to make sure we are not overdoing anything. So basically that's what I'm going to have visible at the end of the day. And this area here around the lips are going to have to clean up for sure. So I'm not going to go down too much in there. We're going to save some time, but I'm going to concentrate in this area here a little bit. So I'm going to keep doing the stretching of those pores, forcing a little bit more. Basically, like I'm building a little line, crossing each pore with a line, but forcing the pressure of my tablet when I pass right on top of the pore. I can either do it like go one side and then the other side, like I was doing before, or you can go with one single line and just like on top of each one of those pores, you actually force your tablet when you're passing right on top of it. And then you create this little effect, right? Just pulling them. And again, respecting that that basically like this the direction of the pores that I mentioned before, right? So that's the only thing I have to pay attention here. One thing I sculpted here yesterday and I started, but you guys didn't see the rest, is that when I'm sculpting the pores towards the nose, you see I start fading away, right? So basically like I keep them pretty close together around here. And then as I get more into the nose, I start like being more economic with them. And it's the same around this area here, close to the eye bags, because they start fading and it basically becomes more like a cross hatch kind of thing. It gets a little bit more clean around there. So we're gonna basically like, that's what we're gonna be doing. So let's keep sculpting here. Oops. Right there, okay. Let's get some detail in there. I might be a little bit strong at 15, so let's try 12. And then let's just propagate right here. And looking for direction, which is not going to be the case if you're looking at the neutral pose, right? You guys are like, thank God Kris shut up for 2 seconds. Jesus. Guy can talk. Right. So at this point here, I mean, it's not a perfect thing by any means, right? It's just like showing some of the techniques I'm using to break things up. I'm going to do the first ever export of this displacement map. And this is going to be just to set up our scene in Maya, because I want to make sure that things are, you know, exciting for you guys. I don't want to bore you every time we do stuff, because all those tasks, they are very repetitive, right? I know it's interesting to watch, you know, But after sometimes like, oh, here you go, like he's gonna add another wrinkle in there. So I'm gonna do this setup. I'm gonna set up the Maya scene. And don't worry, because I'm gonna be coming back and forth to this model all the time and tweaking all this stuff and showing more skin detailing. But for now, to make something a little bit different, since we did some rendering the other day, just to show the, the introduction to the rendering in Arnold, let's do this here as well. So we're gonna go back here, gonna hide everything but this guy. I'm gonna get out of the HD mode first thing, A, right? And of course the model is a mess because it's a mix between the previous model and this one, but eventually we're gonna have everything pretty clean. And then add more variation for everything. Yeah, right now it's still pretty plain. So I have the model in here, and let's prepare it to do our first displacement map export. Let me just, like, there is one thing bothering me, that's the inside of the mouth, and there is just colorize it for now. Let's just turn off here, and just gonna pick a color similar to the lips, and let's do this. Let's just colorize it, paint a little bit in there. All right, that feels better. It was a mess. It was just like I said, the previous models, none of them had an open mouth. So, it's crossing across the color is leaking. So let me turn off the modifier. No, the elasticity. No, where is it? Auto masking. Let's turn off the back face and just paint that. There's even a problem with the little detail in there, but all this stuff are going to be cleaning up. Kind of problem you guys are not going to have if you started the model from scratch, right? But I'm reusing a lot of stuff here. So that's a little better. It looks so funny without teeth. Okay, so let's prepare for the first export. First off, of course, we have to make sure that you have UVs, right? We already went through that process. We know we have UVs. We're creating the polygroups based on UVs. So the two things I'm going to do here with this model, I went down all the way to the lowest resolution, right? And then I'm going to export this mesh actually two times. I'm going to do, instead of like the lowest resolution, I'm going to go one subdivision level up. So lowest, I had 17,000 polygons. One more, I have 69,000 polygons, one subdivision more. I'm going to export this one here, which is not the lowest. This one up the lowest. Let's see, my hard drive slept. Okay, it's awake again. So stand mid-res, which is MR that I'm using, 3. So this is the mid-resolution mesh. And now I'm going to go to the lowest, and I'm going to export this one as stan LR3, which is the low resolution, right? ZBrush is very funny when it comes like to just creating the difference between the base mesh and the high resolution detail. And I mentioned this at the summit, it's like there is a trick in here that actually I had to call Affair himself, the man himself, to explain me how it works. To this day, doesn't make sense to me, but the fact is it works. So it's like this. Go to your morph target. If you have anything stored, and you're going to delete everything. So delete any morph target you have. Of course, if you have stuff important there, you can always like switch it, export your mesh before you do this, so you have it saved somewhere, right? But then the important thing is that we're going to have to eliminate it here. So I'm gonna, now that I delete the morph target, I'm gonna store it again. So store, switch. Nothing happened, but at this point you cannot go up in resolution before you export anything. Otherwise, you're gonna mess up the entire thing, right? So just repeat the process. You're gonna have to press store and then switch straight away. Okay. So I'm gonna delete it again. Let's pretend we are starting from scratch. We have no morph target. I deleted everything. So store, switch, and then go up here. Import. Remember, we just exported the low resolution mesh, right? So I'm going to import it again. It looks stupid, but what this is doing is basically it's forcing ZBrush to have a buffer that's exactly the same mesh. And that means that when it subdivides everything on the fly to export the displacement maps, we're going to be using a feature that's called switch morph target. And it's going to create just a difference. Otherwise, ZBrush tends to create like mid-resolution detail. That's not what we want. We want just the fine stuff. We want just the difference. So now we are ready to export the map. Before I do that, I'm going to just save my scene. Might take a little bit here because we don't want to lose anything that we just did. So it's just going to take a bit. Let's save it HD5. And then my plan is to actually export those maps, and then while things are being exported, we can switch to Maya and start preparing the scene, all right? Because now we already have the mid-resolution mesh, and we can just start preparing things with that mesh. And then I'm going to show you what's my plan and why I'm exporting the mid-resolution mesh for Maya instead of the lowest. It's going to take a little bit. Let's see, saving project. Again, it should gradually grow the size of the file, like I said yesterday, as you add more displacement at the highest subdivision at the HD levels. You're going to see that your file is going to increasingly get a little bit bigger. So now it's saved. Let's see what's the size of the file. So yeah, it's maintaining, because like I said yesterday, it was basically like the surface is completely covered. It's not like adding additional detail, I suppose. It's just changing the detail that I hope is going to stay around like 898, like that. So now it's saved. We already did the process. We started morph target, we switched, and then we imported those 3 steps: store, switch, import. Now we're going to go to the plugin, and we're going to say, let's go to my, let's see, where is it? Multi-map exporter. Multi-map exporter. And then here in multi-map exporter, we didn't go through the process of painting textures just yet. We're going to go through that soon. But at this point, since I have it, I'm going to export it right here. So I'm just going to click the texture from Polypaint and then displacement. If you have any HD information in here, ZBrush is going to take straight from the HD. It's going to do everything from HD. So you don't need to worry about clicking any special buttons. If you sculpt in HD or if you paint in HD, it's going to be exported with your maps. For the map size, by default, ZBrush goes to 496, but the slider here, you can crank it. So I crank all the way to the maximum, which is 8K. And I'm gonna go to export options. The first thing, if you never set up this whole thing in ZBrush, you're gonna click to file names. And this is an important step. Once you do this one time, you don't need to do it again. But by default, ZBrush uses this format. That's the old ZBrush format, like UUVV. So if you keep clicking on it until it switches to UDIM, now that's what we want. We want a UDIM format. And then I'm using TIFF for the format, 16 and 8 bits, and override existing files. So what's going to happen here is that for the displacement maps themselves are going to be exporting the EXR, so it's going to ignore the TIFFs. But for the color maps, everything's going to be TIFFs. Displacement map settings. So here's the trick, right? The first thing you're going to notice that I have the switch morph target on. That's important. That's what's going to do the trick to compare the two models. You export just the perfect displacement, right? And then for the subdivision level, instead of exporting from subdivision level 1, that's the default, basically like starts from the first resolution all the way to the highest, I'm going to start calculating the displacement from the second subdivision and up, because we already exported, if you remember, the mid-resolution mesh. I do that because I like having slightly more resolution in Maya, because since I'm implanting and putting the hair straight to this mesh, I'm not using like another mesh, right? I'm using the exact same one. And I want to make sure that the hair is tight against the scalp, instead of like having something that's like a pretty square, and then all of a sudden you see like from the close-up, the hair is detaching from the hair, the head, right? Of course, there are tricks you can do with XGen and displace those hairs to go in the head anyway. But I like to have like this control to have everything visible, right? So my alarm went on, so that means I'm going to be opening the mic for you guys soon. But let's start this process first. So switch morph targets on. Subdivision level, I'm exporting from 2. I click adaptive, it's on. And DP subpix, I crank all the way to the maximum. Smooth UV I don't need. I want this, the UVs to be as square as possible, because we're going to use the same setting for Arnold. This one by default, ZBrush uses 0.5. You're going to see this if you have your scene in there. Mid at 0.5. That means mid-level gray, 50% gray. But we're going to be using 0, which is basically like the mid level at 0, which is black. And because we are using 32 bits, you're going to have that clicked and the EXR clicked. That means that it's going to calculate negative values as well. So like you're going to go below black and then all the way to white, of course. No 3 channels. We're going to be exporting just grayscale. And then scale intensity doesn't matter because we are not using 16-bit maps. So that's basically the settings you're going to need. You can keep it 1 here. 32, EXR, 0, no smooth, adaptive. Well, you guys can just copy this from the video. You can pause in there. But that's basically the settings I use for exporting, right? So now, before I actually go ahead, ZBrush uses the name of the subtool for naming the files when you export, right? So you have the option now. I have like stan LR3. I can rename to something else if I want to rename that, but I'm going to keep that way because I want to have this control. Like every new version, I'm going to have a new number, like 4, for example, right? So I'm going to create all maps, and then I'm going to go to my structure. Remember that ZBrush, not ZBrush. When I went to Maya, we set a project in Maya. And when we set the project, Maya created most of those folders for you. So by default, Maya is going to look for the source images folder. So I always save my maps in there. So I'm going to double click source images, and I'm going to click save. So that should take a couple of minutes. I'm going to open the mic for you guys in the meantime, and then we're going to start playing with Arnold settings. So let's go here. Mute all, and then you guys mute yourselves if you're not talking. Someone is snoring. That's amazing. Let me see if I detect who is snoring. Okay, Satoshi. He fell asleep. That was the first one I was noticing. Like, man, that's how exciting my class is. So you guys have any question related to this stuff I just explained? I bet you guys have.
Now, here you didn't think much about the asymmetry, right? When you do the wrinkling part?
I'm sorry?
When you do the wrinkling part, you didn't think much about the asymmetry, right?
Oh,
so, smile line?
Oh, the symmetry was on, right?
Yeah, symmetry was on, but I mean, when you do the smile line, it should be asymmetrical over.
Yes, yes. When I start playing with the form itself, like in the base mesh, making things asymmetrical, I'm gonna try to reinforce that asymmetry with the custom wrinkles and things like that, right? I'm actually trying to establish like a basic shape that I can actually use for whatever thing I'm gonna do with it from this point on, right? So creating these stretched lines, like going the right directions at this point is important, but there's a lot of very custom wrinkles being created asymmetrically on top of it. Yeah. One thing that you have to notice about ZBrush is that is still the same problem they had like for a couple of years now. That if I switch focus, for example, my monitor right now, my mouse is resting right here where I'm exporting the maps. But if I switch to another monitor or something else, some other application, sometimes ZBrush kind of freezes and stays right there.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, so that kind of sucks. But even if it's doing that, I still want to start this process in Maya so we don't lose waste a lot of time here. So I'm just gonna switch. Let's go and get Maya going here.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
How long are you going to have those Vimeo videos available?
Oh, that's a good question. Someone asked me the other day, and my plan is to actually have the subscription going for as long as I can with the classes, because the plan with those classes, first I thought about running one time, and then all of a sudden I got all those people interested, and I managed to do like 3 classes in a row. So gonna be like until July, but then I'm gonna go to Brazil for September conference I have, and then coming back, my plan is to run again probably like October, November. So at least for this year, I have completely covered. So you guys were the first ones, and I signed for the Vimeo plan for 1 year. So at least 1 year you have available, so I can actually download this stuff, right? If you don't have access to downloading, I can actually there's an option there. You can actually download the videos. But then if I'm gonna run those classes next year again, which would be nice. I just don't know how many people I can reach with them. then it's going to be another year, you know. In that case, I can just keep going for as long as possible. But I would just tell you guys to download as soon as you have all of them, you know.
Yeah, it doesn't allow you to download unless you get some crazy crack software or whatever.
Oh, really? Okay. So we don't need to do that because I have an option in there in Vimeo. I think by default I turned it off, but I can turn on the downloads and you can do it very easily. So I'm gonna
in my country, data is very expensive.
Yeah, I'm gonna do this tonight. So now what I did, I just zeroed my Maya scene. Basically, like I just create like a new scene, right? So there is nothing in there. Let's start from scratch. And then first thing here we're gonna do, we're gonna import the OBJ. So file type OBJ, and then just a quick reminder that you have to have a single object here. If you didn't do it, it's time to do it. Just click single object, and then to make sure that's saved, you just go to edit and save settings, and that's saved now. So we're gonna import it, and we're gonna go straight to our let's see, Stan Winston OBJ, and then date, and then the Stan mid resolution. So it's about 7 megabytes. The low resolution is 8.1. So we're gonna import it, and now we have our mesh ready to start. Let's see. It seems like I have some Arnold going on here. No, it's good. Yeah, I thought like my CPU start, you know, like spinning there, but Arnold is still fine. So at this point here, there's nothing in there. It's just the base mesh, and I don't have a skin shader assigned to it, right? But we're gonna assign the skin shader today. I can actually borrow it from some model just to show what I have set up. So it's actually easier to do that way. But let's set up the model itself. I showed this process before. So in this case here, I'm going to be subdividing the mesh during render time. So you don't need to do this, but if you want to do it, you can just click your mesh and then go and let's see, in your mesh display, you can just click soften edge, of course, like so it's not all faceted, right? But you don't need to do that because just by subdividing it, it's going to get rid of all those lines anyway. So I'm going to click my mesh. I'm going to click Control A to go to my attributes editor, which shows right here. And then I'm going to go down all the way to where it says Arnold, right? It's going to Arnold. This process I already did before. We're going to do it fresh now so you guys can memorize it. First thing I'm going to do is scrolling down. I'm going to look for SSS set name, and I'm going to do a shared SSS. And I'm going to be doing this for all the elements in the scene here, which are connected to the skin, because I want to make sure that there's a perfect transition in the subsurface scattering between eyes and skin, for example. I'm going to scroll down to subdivision. Where you have none, you're going to put Catmull Clark. And let's put like 4 subdivisions here, iterations. I don't go higher than 5, for example, even if it's HD, because I'm using a lot of displacement map as bump maps. That's basically what Arnold does for us, but for free. So under raster, I'm gonna switch to object. For some reason, I like that setting. It gives me the results. And then for the smoothing, remember I turned the smoothing off for ZBrush. So now I'm gonna turn off like linear, right? Actually, gonna turn to linear, so everything is off. There's no smoothing happening. And then for the displacement attributes, height is at 1. The scalar 0 value is basically at 0. That's how we tweak ZBrush as well. And auto bump, that's important. You have to turn it on here, right? This is new. This new Arnold has all those options, basically like the auto bump, to affect all those different channels, the reflection, specular, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just going to keep the default, that one. And it's important because whatever Maya and Arnold cannot calculate in terms of all the fine detail we have in ZBrush, whatever you cannot afford through subdivisions, because it's going to reach a limit at 4 subdivisions, is not going to go further than that. So anything above 4 subdivision levels, if there's any left detail, it's going to be switched to some kind of like bump. It's a virtual bump that's going to be applied. So that's how we set up the model itself. So it's a couple of things, right? Like shared SSS in there, or it can be any name you want, but as long as you match with the next objects. Catmull Clark, iterations between 3 and 5. Object, linear, and 1, and then auto bump, and that's it. So let's save the scene first. Let's give it a nice name to here. Oh, that's not Hellboy. Let's set the project back to Stan. So let's go back here. Stan Winston. Okay, so now it's set to Stan. So now I'm gonna have access straight to the scenes here. Let's see, scenes. And then let's do Stan render past one. Here you go. And then save it. So now we can start from here. Let's do that little process we did the last time as well with creating the HDRI. So we're gonna do this. We're gonna do Arnold, and then lights, sky dome. Arnold, light, sky dome. Click on it. So now you have the sky dome in there. No texture applied. I'm gonna click in this little option box in here, the little map box, right there. I'm gonna click File. Gonna switch from quadratic to off. So basically there's no filtering in the image. Gonna go down here, make sure it's sRGB. Actually, if it's a HDRI map, it's gonna have to be raw in here, okay? But I'm gonna show you a trick as well for that. Sometimes you have to switch manually from our sRGB to raw. So there's the raw in there, right? But I'm gonna keep sRGB, you're gonna see that it's gonna switch automatically. So I'm gonna go to Arnold. And then here, I'm gonna turn off, like I said, the auto-generate TX textures, because this is the tiling kind of method that Arnold uses. It makes things much smaller, like the scenes are easier to render that way, it's faster. But because I'm gonna be switching maps all the time, I'm gonna turn it off, because I wanna make sure that, if you have enough RAM, you're gonna be able to, to render no problem. So I'm just gonna go to, hello, yep.
Sorry. The sRGB, the raw extension that you said for HDR.
Yes.
Is for any HDR or point EXR as well? Or it doesn't matter?
No, for both. Yeah, for both have to be raw, including displacement. If you're importing displacement maps, they have to be raw. So EXR and HDR. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. So I'm gonna go here to HDRI collection, and I'm gonna go to let's see. I used the indoor last time, and I had I believe it was like a big room. Let's see which ones I can use here. Let's do my go-to one. That's the nature lab. That's the one I pointed to that address in one of those previous videos. So so it's like SIBL, I believe, .com or something like that. So I'm gonna use the reflection one, the HDR. I'm gonna open it. So that's my nature lab right there, which is really nice. It has this nice reflection. Just gonna spin it slightly. Is it not selecting? Let's get my skylight. And then I'm gonna just spin it towards the front here so I get more light in front of his face. And then again, we're gonna set up our camera first, right? So I'm gonna click View here, select Camera. And I'm gonna switch this to 60 for now. And then for my view here, I'm gonna select to switch to Camera Settings and then Resolution Gate. And you see like it's basically like making everything white around the resolution, but the resolution is still kind of like an HD. It says like 960 by 540 by default. To switch it, I'm gonna click this one here, the display render settings. And I'm gonna, first off, I'm gonna give a name to the scene, because you see it's already putting in the path Stan Winston images by default. But any render I do, I wanna make sure that it goes always to that folder, otherwise it's gonna create a mess around my default folder, the outside, right, the Stan Winston. So I'm gonna just put like Stan A here. And for extension, I'm gonna put like number in extension if I'm exporting multiple frames. And then scrolling down here, I'm gonna just switch to, let's say 900 by 900 and make square, because Instagram these days. And Arnold render, this one here, we're gonna crank everything to 3. And the camera, I'm gonna switch actually to about, like the first pass, we're gonna start with 6. So it's not too too bad to render like that. And for the filter, the Gaussian is at 2, but you can start with like, let's say like 1.2 to make it more crisp. Ray depth, for now, we are not going to worry too much because we don't have transparencies or anything, but I, you know, just for fun, I can put some more samples in here. It's not going to use them anyway for now. And that's about it. So we can do a little first render. Just going to do like bring it down like that. So you can see this is the area going to be rendered, like this little square right there. And Arnold, open Arnold render view, which should be here somewhere. Actually this one. And now you can see it's a square in there. I'm gonna just reduce it like that. And let's render. So this is just like there's no shader in there or anything. So let's just steal the shader and show you the first skin shader settings, you know, before we can get a little crazy with everything. So let's see how it renders right now. Probably the intensity should need some tweaking, but see at this point it's like it's very simple. There's not much going on with the scene in here, right? So let's play with subsurface a little bit. Let me see how ZBrush is doing, if it's exporting. Yeah, it did actually. In the background, it still exported everything. It took about 8 minutes and 30 seconds to export 5 8K maps, which is basically what, like equivalent to, so it's like 4 times 5, right? So that's like 20 maps, 24K maps were exported in this process. And it took like nothing, right? Like it was only 8 minutes. Try to do that with the non-HD geometry, and that's gonna be over an hour. So let's go back in here and let's save this file. Now we have this set up like basic render settings. Let's save it over the other one. Let's steal the skin from some other scene here. So it's easier for me to basically like open up the shader network and then explain to you guys. I can start stuff from scratch, but then eventually gonna have to refer to all those values anyway. But yeah, let's do that. I just bring the shader first, and then I try to recreate everything by copying those values, so it's easier for you to see. So let's go to, let's get the skin shader from, maybe from Michelangelo. Let's do scenes, and let's open here. Grooming, let's open that one. I can show you how to export those shaders as well if you don't know how to do it. So it takes a little bit. More questions? Yeah, those classes are going to start getting a little crazy because they're going to be flip-flopping between ZBrush and mine and playing with settings and all this stuff. But I hope, like, as we start seeing some results, you know, like you guys are going to be like, oh man, that's pretty cool. Let's do it. So I'm going to click the head in here, and I'm going to click this little sphere in there, in the right at the top here at the bar. So I click that one, and that's going to bring me my hypershade. And then if I click, see I have the model selected, I'm going to click graph, and then graph materials on selected objects. So that's basically my shader network for his skin right now. And you can see that's super simple. There's not much in there. Sometimes you see tutorials and people have like a ton of stuff. And my shader network is super simple. But just breaking down here a little bit for you guys, it's like just the main shader itself. I have a remap color, which is very interesting. So if you're talking about the skin, the color of the skin, this is an important tip. Normally when you have like a albedo that's extracted from, you know, it's like a light stage, right? You have the albedo, which is basically the color of the skin less the specular, right? So it eliminates the specular, but doesn't eliminate the subsurface scattering that's happening. So what you get with the albedo color is that like everything that's in the scatter is going to be represented in there. So for example, if you have like the fat tissue that's actually orange kind of coloring, right? Because you have like blood vessels, you have the fat in there. It's going to be kind of orange. So that's actually tinting the entire skin. The skin itself, if you removed all those things, it's quite pale, right? Of course, like in relation to the color of our skin, it's like I have a kind of brownish color. You're going to remove this thing, you're going to have the difference between like this orange coloration, you know, and my skin. So I use this remap color in here, which basically like it's a node that Maya has that you can actually have a separation of red, green, and blue. And what I do, I desaturate that color because I want to make sure that I get like exactly what I want. I'm painting that color because there's no other way for me to try to imagine from my head what a skin looks like without the coloration that comes from those layers, right? So I'm going to try to represent what I'm seeing in a reference. But then when I come here, I basically desaturate the red the most. So in my settings here, I have like basically like in the middle, right in the middle, I'm using the select value at 0.320. And then this one here, the green, I'm actually desaturating to like 0.5. And then the blue is the one I'm actually cranking the most at 680. So basically like, you know, that's my settings, but of course, like you can play with them. And then basically this is, it's plugged, like my color is plugged to this, you know, to this node using this one here, the color. And then the out color is actually going to the base color of my shader. So that's just like an in-between thing. That's just like to remove that saturation of those layers. I think it's a very important step, and not a lot of people pay attention to this, including in the studio. Sometimes you see they just plug the albedo straight away, and then all of a sudden it's not getting the result you want because the subsurface scattering is actually adding more coloration to it. So I normally try to compensate that by removing that. And then I have like a bump map that's basically like what's going to control the roughness with the micro displacement. There is a micro displacement assigned to it. And then specular color, displacement, and then color, right? I'm gonna go one by one as we start playing with the shader network more, right? But at this point here, since we are just experimenting with it right now, so what I'm gonna do is just gonna export this whole shader network. So I'm gonna select everything here like that. Select, like open the window like that. Select. Then you go to File and then Export Selected Network. So let's do. I'm gonna go to scenes here, and I can just say skin shader transplant, something like that. And then not OBJ, of course. We're gonna export this as Maya file, right? So Maya binary. So skin shader transplant, and then save it. So let's just make sure that we have in here. So let's go back to import, and then back to scenes. And Maya scenes, skin shader transplant, import. Should be here somewhere. Oh, you know what? It's going to be hard to see because I have so much stuff. Let's see if I can delete those. Let's try again. Scenes, Michelangelo, no Michelangelo. Projects, Stan Winston, scenes, skin shader transplant. So it should be right there. So now we're gonna browse it again. And yeah, it should be all there. So let's just do this graph. So I select the shader network, graph input and output connections. And then that's basically my shader network right there. So let's transplant this to the file we have, which is the Stan Winston one. And then let's explore that and recreate this. And plug the maps. It would be really cool to plug the maps and see what's our starting point, right? Even if it's not perfect, and I know it's not perfect right now because it's very smooth still in the face, it's a good way to start playing with it and seeing what we need to do. So I'm gonna go back to my Hypershade, and I'm gonna just say, okay, let's import, and then the skin transplant. That's the skin. I'm gonna rename it, just make sure that I understand. So that's gonna be Stan skin, right? And then let's create from one thing you can actually do here in Maya. You can do this. If you go right here, you can see like this is my Stan skin, and that's the tab that I have with all the settings for the skin shader. I'm gonna just copy this tab here. Click that one, and now I have like a standalone tab that I can copy stuff from, right? So now if I switch to anything, this tab is always there for me. So let's create a shader from scratch. So I'm gonna go to shader under Arnold. So like the latest one, the last one here, Arnold shader. And then we're gonna create the Uber shader, which is the standard surface, right? And I'm gonna name this one Stan New Skin, something like that. Before I start doing anything, I want to make sure that I'm getting like the feedback straight away. So I'm gonna click the model, and then right click here in the shader and just say assign material to viewport selection. Or you can simply like drag and drop, like with the mid mouse, right? Mid mouse, click and drag. So now we have that one. And as I said before, we have the copy of the tab right there. So let's just make it smaller in here. So now we can copy some of those values here. One thing that Arnold does when it comes to the subsurface gathering, it has the option here, if you go down to subsurface, it has the weight right here. And this weight here, for example, if I all the way to 1, that's completely scattered. If it's 0, it's gonna be completely using the base color right here, which is the diffuse color, right? So if you have anything plugged into this channel, if you added a map in there, for example, and then you have subsurface, you can choose to scatter all the way to have something more realistic that scatters, or something that's a little bit more, let's say like a rubber, you know, and then in that case, you're gonna mix a little bit of ambient with subsurface. So in my case here, you see I have stuff plugged in there for the base, but I did as a backup, because if you look at the subsurface in here, it's cranked all the way to 1. That means it's basically ignoring this entire session in here. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna crank the subsurface to 1. And then there is the radius in here, which is basically what's gonna give you the nice coloration of the scatter is gonna be under the radius. And I can show you like the default color that they use for that, which is kind of interesting, is in the website. And then here for the scale, that's what I was saying before. For example, my models are slightly bigger than they're supposed to be. You know, the first class, we actually reduced the size of the face a little bit. So for the scale in here, I'm gonna reduce from 0.120, let's try 0.110, just slightly smaller. And then if you have the new Arnold installed, and I recommend you guys to install the newest one. If you have mine installed, you just go to the website where the downloads are, and you can have access to the solid angle session, and then just download the latest one. And you should, the latest Arnold has the random walk too. This control here, the anisotropy. So basically like this one here, or anisotropy, I don't know how you pronounce it. Basically like you can go like from front scatter to back scatter, right? So if you're going towards the negative, you're gonna go back scatter, and then this one like front scatter. So what I'm doing here, I'm actually adding a little bit more force in the front scatter slightly. It adds, in my opinion, I mean, it's kind of subjective, you know, it's like, you see my renders are a little bit stylized, I would say, but it adds a little bit more richness to me, even though it might look a little waxy sometimes. I like to add a little bit more of the front scatter. So I'm gonna crank that one to 200. And then since we don't have a color map, actually we have a color map. Let's plug the color map in here first. So let's start with that. So I'm gonna click on the subsurface color, and I'm gonna plug my color map straight away. So I'm gonna go to File, and again, I'm gonna turn off the filtering, right? sRGB is there. If I go here, actually, sometimes like doesn't show you all the options in here. I'm gonna go to my, let's see if I can see all the windows at the same time. Let's minimize this one for now. And then if I click in the model itself, now I have the traversal in here, and I can see all the options. So so I had the map plugged. Let's see. Oh, okay, not plugged anymore. Where is it? Subsurface. Oh, it's plugged here. Okay, let's go back here, and then off, and then I'm gonna go down to Arnold and just turn off the auto generation of the TX textures. And then I'm gonna click this one. I'm gonna browse for the stuff that I just exported. So I'm gonna go to personal projects, Stan Winston. And then remember, we exported everything into source images from ZBrush. And then I have the TMs and I have the DMs. DMs, displacement map, TMs, the texture map. So I'm gonna go for the color maps first. So that's what I have exported. And we're gonna go through the whole process of painting things, but this one is already done, so I'm gonna show you how I plug it. So open that one, and make sure that you turn this one on. So you make sure that sRGB if it's color, and then for the UV tiling mode, you're gonna click, and there's a UDIM Mari right here, right? So you click that one, And you see like it adds a tag that says UDIM in here automatically, which is pretty smart. So it's basically replacing the 1001, 1002, 1003 by a tag. And in this case, he already found 5 tiles, which is what we need. We need to find like those 5 files in there, right? So that's the first step. Then we're gonna go back in here and let's go to the rest of the shader. For the radius in here, I can open later for you guys at the end to show you, like at the Arnold page, they have like the right amount for skin. Another thing you can do is you actually start with the presets in here. You have a preset for the skin. You can do that too. Mine is so different from it that I actually do everything differently, that I don't use it. But you might be able to get some interesting results. You know, you can just click skin and then replace, yeah, using the preset. But in my case here, I'm gonna using the radius. I'm gonna just put a color like this. Let's see what we can get. So it's gonna be slightly on the peach side of things. So probably like yeah, saturated all the way, and then probably like a little bit like on the 2/3 in here, kind of peachy color like that. So that's gonna be my radius for now. Later on, we're gonna be using the color. We're gonna be colorizing the color map to something like this, just to get a little bit of mix of different coloring, right? But for now, it's gonna be very plain. So for the specular right now, we don't have any maps assigned, but let's just copy those values in here. So for the specular, what are we gonna be using here? It's gonna be the weight. It's gonna be at 0.65. It's gonna be different from character to character, of course. Yeah, if you get like more oily skin, you know, you're gonna want something else. Let's see, we're gonna go back down. Transmission, we don't have anything just now. Probably just gonna be in the eyes. And the coat, actually the coat is kind of like a secondary layer of specularity, right? It's just like if you want to produce like an effect of being like a wet skin, you can use here. But I use it as an additional very broad kind of roughness map. So I use the 250 for the regular specular, but I use around 300 here just to mix. And it just adds a tiny bit. It's a very low weight right there, right? Same there, 1336.
Hey, Kris.
Yes.
I have a question about the code, because I think that code ignores like bump mapping and that kind of stuff.
I'm sorry? You think what?
The code ignores the bump mapping, if I recall. Is that true?
The bump mapping?
Yeah, it's like it doesn't get any effect of bump mapping when you use it. People usually use it for car paint and that kind of stuff. So they want to have like a full reflective surface without any bump and that kind of stuff. And I think it's like it ignores it, you know. And I don't know if Sheen does the same or it's only code.
Oh, the Sheen actually, the Sheen works as a velvet kind of thing, you know. It's like it's the micro peach fuzz simulation, but it's not quite doing it. Yeah, the code, what I do, I use a very low value like that. It adds an interesting, I can show you the difference, you know, rendering without and with it.
Okay.
So you can see it. But yeah, it might have to, I have to take a look at that, but I mean, like my results, they look okay, you know. But you might be right in terms of like maybe bypassing the bump effect. So,
yeah, that's. I think I saw it in the Arnold webpage in the you know, and I think it's like the last layer over everything, you know, and
yeah. Just so, like I said, like to add like some wetness, right? Like.
Yeah, and for me, it's like crazy to have to make it work right. You know, I have always been checking your renders, and I think he's using code, but I never make it work like you do. So it's great if you could explain me.
Okay. Yeah. Let's take a look. I mean, like I definitely use it more on the like the rough side of things instead of like keeping like very low values. I use like 0-300, right? So we add like it's kind of like a additional broad spec around the spec.
Okay.
But yeah, about the bump, we have to check. So yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. You can make this work if you put link the bump mapping at the normal slot of the code.
Okay. So at this point here, you see like it's kind of shiny, right? Because we don't have any displacement assigned, or we have no bumps or anything like that. So let's just isolate one area here. Let's just open a little window and look at, for example, let's see the ear here. Let's see if we can go a little bit faster in the render of the ear. We can actually make the render settings a little faster than that as well. Oh, another thing I forgot to do. Let's do this now. Let's just tweak this map. I'm gonna select the sky dome again. And then remember, like I have to match the resolution of the map. So like 496 for the 4K map. And just add one more sample in here for samples 2. Oh, and normalize, gonna turn off normalize. I don't know if it affects the HDRI. It definitely affects the area lights, because like it's more like an artistic thing to normalize, because it's like if you have like a small softbox and you want to grow it, but you want to keep the same intensity all the time, then you can keep normalize and it kind of keeps the same intensity. If you unclick it, basically like if you have a smaller softbox, it's going to produce less light. So it's more accurate without it. So that's why I turn it off. But for the HDRI should be kind of like the same. So so at this point here, we have the model without the displacement map. So you're going to see like everything is very smooth. But we want, the whole objective here is to test our displacement map. So the way to plug it, since we already set up the model to have all those, you know, it's like all those options we set before here, right? Like the shared SSS, all that stuff. All we have to do right now is to actually plug the displacement map. It should work. So let's go back to my hyper shading here. And if you click this main node right here, this one, you can see there's this displacement material in there. So I'm going to click this little box, go to File, and then expand this one here, this little arrow, and then turn off the filters again. And basically like, yeah, if I have like TX file, auto-generate TX file is going to turn it off as well. And then for sRGB, it's going to switch automatically. Let's open the file here first. And then I'm going to click the TM file. Actually, not the TM, the DM. That's the displacement. You see, they're pretty big, right? At 160, because they're all 8K. So I'm going to open that one. And I'm going to do the same thing here with the tiling. I'm going to make sure, you see, it switched to raw automatically, right? And I'm going to show you why it's doing that. So off, you're going to click on it and then switch to Mari again. And then again, you found 5 tiles. That means that's all we need, right? Like all the maps are plugged in there. So at this point, we should be good to go. But let's just show you why they are switching to raw automatically. So if I just expand this, let's see, where is it? Let's go to this option here. So this is the options, right? Like it's the same if you go to Windows and then Settings and Preferences, then that's basically the shortcut right there. And then if you go to, let's see if we can find it here. I don't know if I remember, but it's probably under Color Management. So you see, like I have those options in here, and you can add more stuff if you want. So for example, if I click EXR, you're gonna see there, if the image extension is EXR, do what with it? You just like switch to RAW. If it's HDR, do what with that? Switch to RAW. If it's TX, RAW, right? For example, I can add more stuff here. If I can do like another rule, let's see, like TIFF, right? So if I have that rule TIFF, I can just do like, okay, if the image comes here as TIFF, it's gonna switch to sRGB every time. And then you can add more stuff like PNG, JPEG, or whatever you want to do. So it's an easier way to actually, you know, it's like incorporate those things. So every time you import the texture is going to switch automatically for you. You're going to save it. So that's basically it. So let's try to do another render now with the displacement map plugged in. And you're going to notice that if I try right now, sometimes it doesn't work because there's this refresh thing that Arnold sometimes has trouble with. So the best thing is always like to just like do this, go to render, and then just do an update full scene. And that should reload all the maps for you, and then do a render. So let's see how that those maps work right now, especially the cheek. We're gonna basically focus where I was working before, the stuff that I started from scratch, right? Because we wanna see without any contamination of anything else. Any questions about it? It's clear as mud.
Yes. It's okay.
I wish I had more questions, but I'm about 2 days behind you right now.
That's okay. Well, just make sure you guys are working on this stuff like after the class or before the class or whatever. Just like, you know, I'm not gonna say like keep up with everything I'm doing, because sometimes you just want to take in and then apply as you go with your own project, you know. But if you have anything, I mean, it's like that's the time to actually do some. So let's do this. Look, like I have the skin of the cheek right now. I'm gonna just zoom in here, and we're gonna do a little render of that region, and we're gonna get closer and see what we have in there. So Arnold is loading all those maps. They are 8K maps, so it takes a little bit to load, but they should be there. So it's starting to render. See what we get there. Let's get closer than this. It's getting a little bit of that. But the thing is, like, of course, if I'm using an HDRI map, it's going to be very hard to see the detail, because what happens is that it creates kind of like everything gets softer, right? So let's force something here. Let's hide this HDRI. And just to test the bumpiness of it, if we're getting an interesting result, let's just create a light, area light, like we did before the other day. And then let's bring this area light here from the top. Let's grow it like that. Then rotate kind of like that. Put them around there. And maybe we can get the nice glancing light that we can see the pores. So from here, let's see, let's go to the intensity. I think I'm gonna close this tan skin here for now. We can open later. And let's tweak this. So basically I'm gonna do the same stuff. We're gonna go to normalize, turn off, samples 2. And then I'm gonna crank the intensity here to, I don't know, like let's start with 20. And let's see how strong this is or not. So let's do another one. Yeah, that's pretty good. Like maybe a little too strong. Let's do like sort of, I don't know, 15. Still blowing up a little bit, 12. It should be better. Okay. So let's zoom in around there. And let's expand this and that. And of course, like if I'm using a very low samples for the render, the lowest it is, the harder it's going to be to see the detail. So let's do just like this quick rendering here with a big close up, so it's, you know, so you can see what's going on. But if you still cannot see, I can crank the specular, and we can experiment with the coat as well. So since we were talking about it, and maybe we can do it. Yeah, we start seeing some of the pores right there, right? So let's see. This is the stuff we just sculpted between yesterday and today. Okay, let's see. It's gonna refine. So if I go here to the settings like we had yesterday, actually today when I showed, so I'm rendering at 6 samples only. That's why it's kind of like noisy. It's gonna refine, of course. It's gonna look nicer than this. But you know, if you want to see like very crisp results, especially with the specular, that's very deceiving. Sometimes it's kind of scattery. It's very diffuse. What you can do, you can actually crank the specular here as well. So instead of 3, my default settings normally I use like 3 for everything, but specular 4. So what each one of those channels going to do is going to multiply this number by that number, the first one. So if you have 6, that's going to be 18 here, right? And then 18. But if I have specular at 4 here, that's going to be, you know, 24 or whatever. So it started to render, and you're going to see the pores are still pretty big, right? We don't have any breakup of the form just yet because we don't have the micro displacement assigned to it. We're going to be working on the micro displacement probably tomorrow. But you can see a little bit of the quality of the skin already showing. like I said, like the random walk for Arnold, it goes into those small details, you know, it's like the wrinkles and the pores and everything, and it scatters inside of them. So that's why, like, I never used something like back in the day with Arnold, with V-Rake, when I used it, I would use like a cavity map with a kind of like reddish and colorized inside of the pores and everything to be able to see the pores. But with Arnold, I never need to do that because it scatters so well inside of those details, you know. So right now we have kind of like, it's kind of like an orange kind of pattern right there, right? It's a little fake still. But then as we start breaking this surface off with more detail, then you're gonna start seeing a little bit more realistic stuff. But the cool thing about this is that today, just by, you know, quickly going through the settings for the skin, you already saw that those simple settings I just used are actually working quite well for the skin already. So basically, like, you know, it's like the scale at 0.110, right? If you're using world scale for your mesh, and then the anisotropy to at 0.2 and random walk, and that's basically it, like a simple color and radius. So it's not nothing complex right now, but you can see, like, you know, you can get some very nice crisp results, you know, if you go pretty close like that, right? Just those settings in there. And then of course we're gonna be refining this stuff forever. It's gonna take a couple of days and weeks to get something cool. That stuff that came from Rick Baker right there, right? Like those are already pretty nice, but I mean, if you look at the ZBrush file, it looks like shit. So we're gonna be erasing some of them and doing it better. But that's the kind of detail I told you, like any pimple, like this little thing here, that really pops out of the skin. Random Walk 2 is gonna really scatter it. So it gets like this nice, very translucent kind of aspect to it, you know? And it's cool because when you look at the, if I bring this picture here, let's see if I can find it. So this guy right here, right? This is a much more diffuse and it's much more breakup. It has the micro displacement already applied in there, right? Because it's a real picture. But you're gonna see, for example, like if you get really close to any macro photography, how translucent things are. It's kind of like, it's almost like a gel, right? It's like super translucent. If you do anything like that in your model, people are going to be like, oh my God, this is too scattery, remove that. But then as you get further and further from the subject, everything starts looking a little bit more solid, right? So all of a sudden, like, oh, it doesn't look too scattery. But then you go back to, you know, it's like to find like specific areas. And then, you know, it's like, again, it's like super scattery. It's just a matter of like, before you start playing with the scatter, for example, like do everything by elimination, right? So you start with without any displacement, of course, because it goes much faster if you're testing it. And without any color, you start with a grayish kind of, you know, color for your shader. And then you start with the backlight, for example, just to get like, you know, the right amount of depth for the back of the ears, right? And then, for example, a side light, so you can actually get to something like this, how deep it's going to scatter. And then it's just a matter of like trial and error. That's why I'm giving you already that value, that's 0.110 in this case here, because I kind of went through that process, right? And it's completely dependent of the light. So right here is basically just one area light, but as you get like into the HDRI stuff, you're gonna notice that it's gonna look very different, right? And of course, you can do a combination of both. If I want just like to do a filling here, so let's do this. So shrink a little bit, so like that. And then I'm just gonna do like a little bit of a filler. I can use that HDRI map I had before. So let's go back here and then just like show the HDRI, Shift H. And I can just reduce the intensity here to something like 0.1. So now we have a little bit more of a bounce. So you get a little bit more realistic result, right? The lips, in my case here, it's a shame that I'm not going to be sculpting a lot of lips for this guy because since he's smiling, this is already stretching, right? So I'm going to have to be very subtle with everything in there. But yeah. Any questions about it, guys?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's like at the end of the day, it's going to be a matter of preference, right? You guys,
That would make sense.
his smile is so funny without teeth in there. Another thing that the Arnold has is basically like you can control a bunch of things here. For example, like the gamma and exposure. So you can actually create like some more interesting, more realistic results by actually increasing the gamma and just like reducing the exposure a little bit, right? You can counter it, especially like with very light skin. So it kind of looks like a little bit more of a washed out kind of picture, you know, if you do it that way. But then of course you have some presets here. So if I go to, let's see, gamma, that's the default, right? If you go to those presets, they have other results in here. You're gonna switch for you, look. There's this log here that's kind of interesting. It looks kind of like a Instagram kind of filter. And there's this Stingray one that's a little bit more, you know, contrasty. The raw is pretty dark normally. The sRGB gamma, that's basically my default color space. Between this one and the 1.8 gamma, it's a little bit of a difference, but between it and the 2.2 gamma, it's almost the same. The gamma gives me a little bit more brightness in the shadows, but the sRGBs, that's basically how my monitors are calibrated or not calibrated, because every time I post something on Instagram and I look at my screen, it's like, it doesn't look anything like it. And it's always darker than what I intended to. But, you know, I have one of those spider screen calibrations. I have to go through the process and calibrate again because, yeah, it's not quite there.
Make your renders, do you render in passes and overlay them in, say, Photoshop or whatever, or is that not part of your process?
I can go through that process. I mean, like Arnold has, of course, like all this. If I go to my settings here, right? Arnold has this AOVs in here, which is basically the passes, right? So you can add each one of them. You can add the RGB and the Z pass, that's the depth pass. All this stuff, you have the albedo, you know, the subsurface, you have all this stuff in there. And then you can actually control this by bringing them into Photoshop and then using, for example, like a screen or overlay in Photoshop and just like mixing together until you get the same result. And then that way you can actually have control over the specularity and everything. But I'm gonna tell you that I don't know if it's something I heard in the past from Pixar in an interview, that they said they tried to get everything perfect straight out of the render, so that they don't have to do any comp or anything like that. So I kind of embrace that. So if I'm doing something in Arnold and Maya, I try to get something that's as good as possible out of the box. And then if there's any like necessary color correction and stuff, it should be minor, you know. I try to get like, if the color is not quite there, I try to tweak like that map that I have the you know, it's like to desaturate the color and stuff like that, and try to create something that looks cool in Arnold from the get-go. And then that means like you're gonna have much less work to do in Photoshop later, you know. But it's just a matter of like philosophy, I guess, because if you really want to have control, the same way you have the controls with the layers in Photoshop, you want to have controls with the layers in the renders, obviously. So
one more question.
Yeah.
For my particular character I'm working on, I want to make the render have like a Technicolor quality to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, you know, looks like it was a movie from the 60s.
Uh-huh.
Would you do that in Photoshop, or would you do that here in Render View?
I'm going to show you this. Check this out. So if my Photoshop, what I have, so I have this plugin that I bought that was, I don't remember how much it costs right now, but it's called Alien Skin Exposure. So let's see if I go to this website here. Let's try to find it. Alien Skin Exposure. And let's see what's the version they have. It's already exposure 4. I only have until 2. It's probably much better nowadays, but I can show you what they have in there. So let's see how much it costs. Exposure 4. Not too bad. It's like 149. Well, this one 119. This one comes with more shit in there. So 119. Yeah, it's not that cheap, but I bought it back in the day. I think it was a little cheaper than that. So the way it works is like this. Check this out. So if I open anything, let's get a raw file here from, let's get, let's see, the Michelangelo one, I think is a good one. So if I go to my raw images, I can bring like EXR in here. So let's try some of those. Alpha channel. So those two renders here from the Michelangelo guy, right? So if I want to do something to look more interesting, I can, first thing, it doesn't work with 32 bits. So I have to convert this from 32, that's what I have, to 16. So I'm gonna go to images, image mode, and then 16. And then it's gonna make everything look wacky. But then I'm gonna go to local adaptation. I'm gonna click exposure and gamma, and then it should bring back to normal, and then okay. So now it's 16-bit maps right there, right? 16-bit. So I'm gonna go to filter, alien skin, and I'm gonna do a little demo here, which is really cool actually. It's a nice little plugin. It has its own interface. It's actually standalone as well, so you can actually work with it standalone. So we have, it's similar to Lightroom. If you play with Lightroom, it has all the controls for color and everything, but it has a lot of presets that come with it. So if you look in here, let's see, let's close all those custom ones I have. Roy, blah, blah, blah. And let's go up, all the way up here. And you're gonna see all, right? So they have like all the black and white filters in there. And then you're gonna see low contrast. They have the Polaroid stuff. So you have like, you know, every time you just go through them, you're gonna see like it changes in there. So I use a lot of those guys like for more artsy stuff, right? So if you're looking for something like that, you know, you get like old pictures, like a lot of stuff. And they have basically like those are based on the actual cameras and films. So a lot of stuff is kind of like physically, I'm not gonna say physically accurate, but it's a nice emulation of the real thing. So if you go to, let's say, split toning, no, let's see, I think there's a cinema kind of thing. Bokeh. So the bokeh has some interesting stuff, you know, it's like it gets, you know, blurry around the borders like that, like the old school lenses. And then bright, let's see, cinema, right? Cinema here has all those presets, a little sharper like that, you know, like orange. And then they have the names as well. Sometimes you get like, let's see, Technicolor, right? Technicolor.
Yeah, that looks good. Yeah.
Yeah, so kind of like that. So this is a nice collection of filters, you know, and each one of them, you can customize them completely. So I use a lot of it, you know, for post-processing. Yeah, so it's cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So this card changes here, but yeah, so I think like for today, that's basically what I can explore. Like I still have some time for more questions, but my intention for tomorrow, actually tonight, right, when I go back to this guy here, it's funny that the perspective stopped working almost completely, so it looks flat now. It's like, so bad. Anyway, so let's see, subdivision levels, what happened here? Oh no, it actually broke. Look, I'm glad I saved it before, because always save your files before you export your displacement maps, because sometimes when you, I'm sorry, oh sorry, it's a lot of noise here. I was just gonna mute you. It's Lorgas actually. I'm gonna mute him. So right now what happened is that if you see something after you export your maps that says output 4, that's basically because he aborted like halfway somewhere. That's like the temporary name that it gives to the layer when it's exporting your maps. So it doesn't reverse back to the original name. That means it kind of crashed in there. So if you try to do anything from now on, it's kind of crashed. I don't even have my HD anymore, look. So I'm gonna have to reopen the file. But the intention tonight is to actually keep refining those forms a little bit more, like in the cheeks, and then probably erase some areas around the eye bags, and then kind of like, before I start sculpting wrinkles in the eye bags, I'm gonna keep kind of cleaner for tomorrow, and then export more of that tomorrow. And then from this point on, it's going to be a lot of kind of back and forth, refining those things, and then getting into color. I don't know if tomorrow, probably like more likely Thursday, going like painting in the color from scratch, and then exploring how to do that. And yeah, for today, I guess I gave you the settings for the skin, like a start point, I guess, right? Like you can actually do some tweaking in there. And then how to plug those maps. So that's just a starting point, and then we have this scene saved, and then we can keep going with this, you know. Let's click this one, save it. And any more questions? I still have some time. Oh, let me open this. before I go, because I promised that. So Arnold skin. Let's just look Arnold SSS or Arnold 5 SSS right there. And the first linking here, when you do like Arnold 5 SSS, you get to this reference material. That's the web page with the manuals. So you're gonna have to subsurface, like the entire manual for Arnold's in here. You're gonna have everything you need in there. They don't even need me. But let's see. So there's all like the, you know, the presets for materials and things like that. And then there's a spot here they talk about the color for the skin. So when rendering skin, you should use a value of 1, 0.35, and 2, indicated that the red should scatter deepest and green and bluest less. So basically what they use the RGB to create like the depths. So like each one of them modulates the depth, right? So the deepest and based like the color is gonna be scattering more than the other colors by using that definition. So 1, 0.35, and 0.2. So let's see what we have right here by default, because I just got like a random color in here. Let's try to mimic that to see if at least we start with a good, let's see, go back here. So this color here, the radius. So let's switch to RGB. And it's gonna be 0 to 1, right? So it's gonna be 1, what's that, 0.35 they said? And 0.2, is that correct? I don't remember, let's see, let's go back. Yeah, 0.35 and 0.2, so 1, 0.35 and 0.2. So when I switch to those colors, that's basically like the peach I got, right? I went from this one here, it was a little bit lighter, something a little bit more saturated. So this one, according to their manual, it should be more of like an accurate representation of the color of the scatter, right? So let's keep that one. I'm gonna save the file again, and then we can use that value from now on. And if we need to tweak, of course, it's gonna be tweaking it, but yeah. Yeah, if you guys have time, go to this website, you know, so I can start exploring it. It has everything about it, and including like what I said, like, you know, more back scatter and front scatter. The difference between the regular random walk to the random walk 2 right now, like I said, like it gets more detail into deep spots and small detail, you know, it's more accurate for this kind of stuff, especially like wax and things like that. And this is what I have for the set name that I mentioned before in the attribute of each one of the objects. If you don't have all the objects, for example, the eyeball and the skin matching the same shared SSS name, you get this type of result. So you're gonna get like a darker line around those objects. But when you have them sharing the same space, everything blends together. So, you know, that's all in the manual in there. So, yeah. So, well, if you guys have any more questions, I give you one more, and then we are kind of done, and we go back to our work.
For me, it's less than a question. It's more like I've been testing the anisotropy value that you have been touching in the subsurface scatter.
Yes.
And yeah. Man, that's awesome. I've been struggling a lot with the frontal scatter, and that's an awesome trick. So thank you. That's great.
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna if I do it like real time, look at that. What happens right there? Look. So it's like it's completely back scatter now, right? So if I go completely front scatter, it's gonna look very crazy.
Yeah.
But if you add just a little bit of front scatter, it can be like from 0.1 to 0.2. It's a different thing. Oh, another thing we forgot, right? We're just like gonna give a little more time here, that we are talking about the coat. So just crank the coat here. Let's see what kind of result we get. So we had just that little bit.
I will just upload to the chat like 2 images that explains how to add the band mapping to the code. I will check it in depth.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can try with the bump map, because with the subsurface itself, or with the displacement itself, it works. Kind of like, it respects the displacement. But I know what you mean. Like, for example, if I have a micro bump breaking up, maybe it's not going to be considering that. But again, like, I think you're going to be more noticeable if you have a roughness very low, for example, like shinier, right? Like a wet. But if we have something that's a little bit more rough, like a 300 or even 400, it's going to help, I think, to spread that that detail, you know.
Yeah.
Someone told me that sheen actually would help me to add more of like a realism to the skin. For example, like have the simulation of the micro peach fuzz in there. And I tried to do it, but since I'm actually using the actual peach fuzz, when I did that, it looked kind of fake, you know. It's kind of nice if you have like clothing, you know, it's like you have velvet and stuff, and it's seen from the distance. It works very nicely. But for the skin, I guess if you're trying to do like close-up shots, it's kind of like it looks a little, I don't know, I don't quite like. If you have the actual peach fuzz like we're going to be doing here, you get a nicer result, I think.
Okay. Thank you, Kris.
Well, thank you guys, and I hope it's starting to get a little bit more in that you know, production kind of thing that we are, you know, trying to do here in the class. It's basically going through all the processes, right? And I'm gonna be focusing probably like in this area that I sculpted by from scratch, instead of like looking and trying to render the stuff that already looks good from other iterations, right? Try to make this whole area here look good, so actually we are in the same page with everything, and in the spirit of not hiding anything, right? So, but tomorrow I'm gonna be working more towards the around the eyes, the eye bags. I think is an important area to work. And then the lips, very little, because like I said, in my case here, they're already kind of stretched because he has this big smile, right? So not much to do in there, but awesome, guys. Thank you so much. I'm really liking to see like your work, the stuff you're posting. I'm just like stopping myself from commenting on anything. I'm enjoying you guys commenting on each other because most of you guys have a ton of experience, which is really cool. And but I'm excited to actually do some paint overs and make you all depressed with my comments. No, I don't do that, man. It's like even
Nice.
when the only chance I had to supervise a show, I was super nice, man, because my philosophy is always like start like praising the good stuff, and then you take it apart, right? But you start by saying like, dude, you're doing a great job because this is that. I think it's important because I mean people are putting effort, you know. So it's nice to recognize what's right first. So yeah. All right, guys, thank you so much, and I see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Bye, Kris. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye. Turn off.